Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, where you get concrete tools for mindset work, my best tips for lowering your anxiety. And you also hear funny and encouraging stories from me and others who have stories to share. Around here, you'll discover the easy way to stop overthinking, to get rid of self doubt, and finally embrace a calmer, more confident you. I am Olga, your host, a former therapist, a life coach, wife, blissfully an IVF mother, and a coffee lover. I'm excited that you tune in today, and I'm honored to be on the journey with you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I have a repeat guest. Steph has been here before. We recorded another episode from Breakdown to Breakthrough. And today we are intending to talk about the power of using our voice and the power behind our voice. So a few weeks back, Steph and I were chatting. We're good friends, and I'll let her introduce herself and what she does in a moment. We were chatting on our chat, and she was bringing me back to a memory, which we'll get into, when I said something. And this is not the first time this happens to me, that I say something to somebody and I just forget about it. Really don't even remember I said it. And then that person, like Steph, says, like, your words meant so much to me. And they've created this transformation. And in this particular case, what we're going to tell you about is not only what the impact of my words, but then what happened to Steph as she became aware of the impact of words and using her voice. So I thought it was such a beautiful circle coming back to the use of the word. And I thought it would be a great conversation to have here, because I know many of my clients specifically are always looking at building their confidence and the confidence of using their words and how expressing their opinions and listening to other people's opinions and understanding the difference between not only knowing what your inner voice is telling you, but then giving it power, because they're two different things. Sometimes we're great at listening and knowing what we want, but a little less strong on the following up and backing up with power what our inner voice is saying. So I'm hoping this podcast is motivational for you and it helps you shift the mindset that you might have today that says it's better to stay quiet to keep harmony going. I'm going to try and challenge that and listen to me, you got to listen to the end of this podcast. I am going to teach you, and with Steph, that you can change that mindset and that you can in fact start believing that speaking up does not equal conflict. Nobody likes conflict. I don't like conflict. And I still use my voice on a regular basis. And so those steps. So Steph, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and then we dive in.
I'm so glad to be back here, Olga. Thanks for having me. My name is Stephanie. I am a success coach for entrepreneurs, and I use tools like NLP to help my clients achieve the results that they want. And oftentimes it's, I'm using a word like results, which feels pretty masculine to me. But often what my clients are looking to accomplish is they want their life to feel joyful. They want their life to feel balanced. They want the work that they do to not dominate their life. And they want to make good money doing it. So we look at the things that keep them from accomplishing that. And then we eliminate those blocks using their unconscious mind to help make the success that they want easy and effortless.
You tell my clients what NLP stands for.
Yeah, so NLP is short for neuro-linguistic programming, and it's the study of the mind and how the two parts of the mind, the conscious and the unconscious, work together, and how we store information. So we store information in our mind, and how we know that people store information differently from person to person is the words they use. So if you think about this for a second, when you say something like you're talking with somebody and you want to let them know that you understand what they're explaining to you, you may say something like, "Oh yeah, that totally resonates with me." Whereas another person might say, "I see what you're saying." Those two words, resonate versus see, indicate that people process information auditory versus visually, and they represent things in their mind in two different ways. So it's noticing things like that that help us understand where the person is experiencing maybe a blockage in their unconscious mind or disempowerment that we can then go in and rewire. So we can find the root cause, uproot that, and then rewire their thinking so that they can have what they want.
I love it. Okay, let's dive in. I'm going to let you tell this first part of the story because I think that's what you reminded me of on our chat the other day. And then we can just dive in as coaches and as women who have experience using our voice after having had the limiting belief that we couldn't or that we shouldn't. And so let's just tell my audience what happened way back then when we first met in person. I think it was like, I do remember having a conversation with you while eating ice cream. After
Yes. Oh, yes.
ice cream is so important in this part of the story. No, I'm joking, it's not. But we were eating ice cream and we had just left a business meeting where we were being coached by a business coach. And we had just met. I think that was the first day we met. Go.
Yeah. So in that in that first meeting, I remember feeling like I had questions. There were, like 20 people in the room, and I had questions that I felt as though with everyone talking, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And that felt incredibly disempowering to me. And I didn't know what to do about it. And so, in this conversation that you mentioned, we went out for ice cream and I talked about this. And I think it was either then or a little bit later on Voxer, you said, I, you know what? You've got, like, the only one that's going to speak up for yourself is you. I learned a long time ago, I have a voice and I love my voice. And that helps me speak up for myself. And I just remember thinking of saying those words myself. And at the time, I started crying before I even acknowledged that I had a voice. And I thought, this doesn't seem normal. And I don't know what normal would be, but it seems like being able to speak up for myself, especially in such a simple setting as being in a collaborative um, masterminding environment, it seems like that would be pretty foundational to me accomplishing the things I want to accomplish in my life. And so I started practicing saying that phrase like in a mirror, and I couldn't get through it. I kept crying. Every time I would say this phrase, I have a voice and I love my voice, I would cry before I got through it. And my goal was, I'm going to say this until it's true and just love myself in the process until the tender part that feels like this is not true feels heard and understood. And I really didn't expect everything that came up as a result of doing that. But I can say, fast forward 2 years, that I have a voice. I love my voice and I use it, and it's easy. And I'm so glad.
And there is no tears, there's a massive smile on your face.
That is exactly correct.
So you guys, I remember noticing Steph being flustered at this meeting. This is not news to you, I'm sure, Steph, but you get red when you're upset.
No, not at all.
I am the queen of reading body language. And so that would have not been unperceived by me at the meeting, which I think may have been also what triggered the conversation we had at ice cream place. And this is true to me. And I want to explain a bit, you guys, where I learned that I had a voice. when I say I have a voice and I love my voice, I just love what comes into my body, into my experience, into my feelings when I backed up myself with my word. So I have a thought, I like this music, I like this music, I like this music. And then I have another thought that says like, it's okay, keep the calm. Don't say anything, don't tell anybody that you don't like this song, that we should be moving on to the next one, just keep the calm. Over time, I would have learned to ignore myself. And it was expensive to me. The cost of ignoring my voice was very expensive to me. It cost me a burnout to the point that I was close, very, very close to quitting helping altogether because I felt so burned out. I honestly hit a dark spot where I didn't think there was a return, that I would not get my brain back. I felt I have fallen into a black hole and there is no way out of here. I don't need to tell you how terrifying that is. It is terrifying. And so I decided that that was never going to happen to me again because I was never going to ignore my inner voice ever again. My inner voice told me a long time ago, you need to take vacation. You need to work a little less. You need to have less expectations. I had heard all of those things. I had never given them power. And when I did, and I will give credit to my husband who's modeled this for me so well, there are people who never even think twice about saying what's in their mind. And then there are the other ones that overthink all the things that they want to say because they have so much in their mind. Well, my husband models for me the speaking up and worrying about the consequences later. Like first I'm going to say what's in my mind. And if he happened to, have said something that wasn't cool, he will deal with the consequences of that later as he notices. And I met my husband maybe 3-4 years after I had that burnout, and I was already experiencing the using my voice. You guys, since I set that expectation of using my voice, I confronted people like my boss. Like, no, I think you're giving me too much work. And I noticed that it wasn't one creating conflict, and two, that it was making me be heard. Because I always felt like nobody hears me. But really, it's not that nobody hears me, it's that I don't speak. So how would anybody hear me? Right? Like if you don't say what's on your mind, well, no, nobody can hear thoughts unless they're expressed in words. Being in a relationship with somebody who has no ifs and buts about expressing. And by the way, my mom is the same. My dad, like, I don't know why it took a husband for me to because my parents speak their mind out, like too much sometimes. I'm like, Mom, is there any screening that you can just, or my dad, I don't know. They're both brutally honest, embarrassing honest. Like I took them out for lunch the other day with another couple friend of ours, and I was literally opening my eyes every time, like, oh my God, you can't say that. They were just, one of our friends was saying that their son stopped talking to them, and my dad immediately said, oh, he became a psychopath. Incredible. I was like, Dad, what are you saying? So I opened my eyes so big, and I actually said something like, Dad, you can't say that. That my dad was like, that I think about it. I don't really know what a psychopath is, but I would imagine it's somebody who stopped talking to their parents. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't take you guys out. Anyways, so I don't understand why when I've been modeled the speaking up, I took it upon myself that I didn't, that was creating conflict and that was in my job to do. I have an idea as to where that came from. But that was my thing that I didn't express enough. And I realized the impact of that was incredibly hurtful and not loving. It was not loving towards myself. And so my husband really encouraged me, if you thought that, why didn't you say it? And then I'll have conflict because I didn't say the words. So I became really good. By the time I met you, I had been married, like I want to say 5 years. And so I had been really mastering the 5 years of speaking up, even when it felt difficult, and being really encouraged to do that. Like in that sense, my husband is a great motivator. So when I say I love my words, it's because I love what comes after, the level of confidence, the inner peacefulness. And it challenged, and I don't know if this happened to you or if it's happening to you, it challenged the part of my mind that thought speaking up in a timely manner, so not 5 years later, in a timely manner, avoided conflict in the long term. Mm-hmm. That when I wasn't speaking up, and I would say it 5 years later, I was actually creating conflict where it no longer belonged versus saying in the moment, Steph, I don't like the way you're talking to me right now, which I wouldn't hesitate twice now to say it. And it started with simple little things at the restaurant. You know what? How was your meal? Not good. It would have killed me to say, but if I didn't like it, I started there. I was like, that it wasn't great. Like you have to start somewhere. And so that was me. Just like, okay, I'm going to, like, how are you? Not good. Today I'm not good. And then notice what happened later. It wasn't nearly as terrifying as whatever my mind told me prior to those years where I was using my voice and loving it. So why don't you tell us a bit about the mindset shift? Like, I kind of talked about my mindset shift, and I can potentially break it down into steps for people if you guys were interested, which I will never know if you're interested, so I'll probably just do it anyway. Here, at least I have you stuff to talk back. Sometimes I'm sitting here doing the solo episodes and I'm like, well, I'm just going to imagine that people want to hear about this, and I'm going to say, tell me a little bit more about that journey. And I love that you said it's taking 2 years. It's 2 years since you said, I'm going to be saying these words until they become my truth, until I believe them, until that emotion that I'm feeling today kind of settles down a bit and I own it and I let the power and I would say you were crying because you had compassion for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I was seeing a part of myself that was really hurting. And so the tears were because I was actually noticing it.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 years ago, that part of me that felt like it's not safe to speak up, I really believed that if I did that, I would get anger back that I wouldn't be able to handle. And I didn't know it at the time, but everything that I was doing was to protect me from receiving anger, whether it's from a waiter or a wait staff. That to me, like, I remember one time my husband, who my learnings came from my husband as well. So I absolutely understand this. I think we had only been married a year or two, and we were celebrating our anniversary. And we went to this really well-known restaurant. We were so excited. And we were just a little let down by the meal. And my husband told the wait staff, they asked how it was, and he said, it was just okay. We weren't very impressed. And he rolled his eyes and walked away without saying anything. And that to me ruined my whole night. I was like, oh my word, he's mad at us. I don't know why that bothered me. Like, if I sit there and think about it, my husband would be like, sorry, what was his name? And how often are you going to see him again? And I could not, I would be able to identify, I'm never going to see this person again. I engaged with this person respectfully and with love in my heart. And now I'm just sharing my point of view. I viewed my point of view, if it possibly created any negative emotions for another person, I viewed my point of view as that means I'm a bad person. So if I didn't like my meal, I'm actually seeing that I'm a terrible person and that my intentions are bad and awful. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was all very much a trauma response that helped me stay on mute as much as possible. And it was through becoming
Hold on. I want to break this down for people because I think this is so golden right now. Like, people will probably do this. You were owning the response of your words, like the response that people may have to your words. You were owning them as you had full control over how people were going to respond. And here's the fallacy, the mental flaw, that no matter what you say, it could be the roses and honey. I'm saying that to you. You could still interpret that in your head as like, what is wrong with these women? And still negatively respond to my nicely gesture words. So we are never in control of people's responses. And I think that's the fallacy, that we think we might. And so we're like, I'm only gonna say or not say so that I now control their response.
Yeah.
Think about it. We're control freaks by nature. We want to
absolutely
out of everything. Sorry, I want that point to be clear.
I think the interesting thing about this too is we think we're like, I viewed myself as fragile when I was doing things that felt control that I realized later were controlling. In addition to that, the problem with this method of communication and interpersonal relationships was that I would learn that something that I thought would go well would go poorly. And so I would misapply that as a rule. So I would make that a rule that, like, okay, well, when I said this, this type of person responded in this way. So I can't say that anymore to anyone who fits that kind of category. And ultimately, what I did was I just backed myself further and further into a corner because there were fewer and fewer things I could say until I was just living completely disempowered. And I didn't know it. And it was really like what helped me see that was this meeting where I was taught as a child, like, you never interrupt someone ever. Interruption is one of the rudest things you could ever do. And it was something that we got in trouble for as a child. And so I was waiting for there to be a pause. And there's a room of 20 women all brainstorming. There's not going to be a pause. So I didn't know how to assert myself, and asserting myself was in my childhood was called aggressive and rude and mean and condescending. And so when I was sitting there, I was like, I am being a good person and my needs aren't getting met, and I don't know what to do. And here I've invested to be here, and this is the best I can hope for, is to sit here and everyone else gets their needs met, and I'm paying for everyone else to get their needs met but me. And that's when, like, when it was the convergence of realizing this plus you saying that, I have a voice and I love my voice, that helped me realize me speaking up for myself is my responsibility, no one else's.
I'm clapping. I want to bring you back to two steps to something you said that I thought was also important, really important recognition. Not only like, which is so like, this is what I find fascinating about limiting beliefs. And for anybody who's listening to me talk for the first time, what I mean by limiting beliefs is thoughts in our head that are repetitive, that come to, they play like life rules of how we view the world. And so Steph had a life rule that said interrupting is mean. But then I think she translated that into just don't speak when others are speaking at all. Like, do not occupy space. And whoever taught you that was so not South American. By getting in a word in a room full of South American people, you learn to just be the loudest. Like, nobody ever finishes a thought. We're just like, oh yeah, and that brings me over to here, and then that. And so I feel that it's so some of it is cultural. And I do want to say, for anybody listening and saying, like, so are we supposed to be interrupting people? No, you're still supposed to listen attentively. Just don't forget to speak up. Should you have something to say? Right. And I think so that everybody understands that. Let's just tell them. We were a room of 20 women in a living room, getting hot seats or wanting to get our coach to coach us through something. Obviously, every single one of us has a burning need. Like, I want to know, how do I write emails? I want to know, how do I increase my revenue? I want to know. Everybody had a thought like that. And we were patiently taking turns, but also taking space. Like, it's my responsibility to get my question answered. And I think that's such a beautiful reframe you gave, that having that conversation and having experienced that frustration that everybody got their needs met. And you're like, but why am I still waiting? How many times will you have walked away thinking, that's just who I am. I'm invisible. Nobody sees me. My needs never get met, right? Like, victimizing ourselves, because that's what we get really good at unconsciously. Is that, of course, I was the only person who didn't get their questions answered. Because we give just as much as we want to control people's responses when we speak, we also sort of give up control. This is the part that I find fascinating. In some ways, we're so controlling. I want to know exactly that you like me stuff. So can you give me all the signals and I'm going to do all the things that I think you want me to do so that at the end of the day, the outcome favors me. But at the same time, the person who holds that belief then also releases all power to others to make them feel a certain way. Okay, it's your turn, Steph. Like the coach never said it's your turn, Steph. And that's why you didn't get it. Because the egos that were in the room were like taking all the space, I want a piece too. And that's something that you will find. And I think in a way, this is such a blessing that you're an entrepreneur because you will be facing very strong personalities that are not afraid of occupying space. Right. And so we get into that space of like, yeah, no, I'm going to get my needs met because that's what I came here for. And what I want to highlight is that can be done in such a loving way that you don't need to be a bitch, that you don't need to not care about others, which is what my mind will used to think. If I stop caring about people's responses, then I don't care about people. So I become cold, mean, and rude. There is a way of expressing, there's a way of taking space while being incredibly loving to your star selves first and to the people we're talking to. And I think is finding that balance, but you first must get rid of those mental blockages. So I love that you took full on responsibility. Okay. So what happened from then on? Like understanding I have responsibility to take, bringing yourself to the concept of I can love my voice and is not rude. And I think you also bring up a really great point. Sometimes as children, because our brain is not fully developed, we hear our parents say, don't interrupt. And what you heard was don't talk.
Yes.
Right? Which are two different things. Like somebody saying, do not interrupt me when I'm talking is not saying you cannot talk. And so I think that as adults, we have to go and reorganize as well some of the thoughts we may have collected or understandings we may have collected when we were in childhood because they were inaccurate. Most times we're like lacking space. Like we didn't have the context to make a good understanding of what was going on.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So my journey since then has been definitely one I never expected to take. To give you a then and now, I find that to be helpful because I think that having this kind of like end picture or a bringing people up to date gives people hope that change does happen. If I start step by step as to what changed, you might not notice it as much. But I went from that room of women where I realized I don't really have a strategy for what to do if I have a question. I don't know how to ask a question. To having repressed memories of trauma coming up in my life and confronting my abusers. And that was never something I thought, I didn't know this was a part of my life. I didn't expect to navigate that. And if I had navigated this as the person I was a few years ago, I would never have confronted my abusers. I would never have spoken up for myself. And that I did is evidence of this work. When I realize, oh my word, I'm doing it. I am speaking up for myself in the most crucial and important ways. I look back at all the steps and realize it wasn't learning this truth. I have a voice and I love my voice and saying it in the mirror and then suddenly having this huge opportunity. The opportunity came to me when I was ready. What it started with was, and I fully believe that the universe gives us exactly what we're ready for. And I look at the journey that I've taken over the past 2 years to personal empowerment specifically, which involves using my voice. And it started with very simply learning to be at cause for my results and recognizing that the things that I was learning at the time I was getting coaching certifications, and I was learning some things that felt really important to me. And in the past, I would have just started teaching those things to my clients. But for some reason, I paused and I thought, no, I need to be the result first. And so I started practicing the things I was learning in my coaching um, program. And the first thing that they taught was, be at cause for the results you want, be at cause for your life. The hard thing about learning to live as the cause of your life and your circumstances are the effect of your life is that at first it's sucky because I chose to take responsibility and to be at cause for things that did not turn out well. I chose to look back on, say, this meeting and recognize I didn't get the result I wanted because I chose that. I chose not to speak up. And so, therefore, when I choose not to speak up, no matter what, when I choose to let fear dictate what I do, then the result is what I chose. So it started that way for me, and I did what I could with that tool. Then I started speaking up in really innocuous situations. So I started saying what I wanted with friends I didn't know very well because that was easiest. Like, I don't know, I don't really care a ton.
Mhm.
Um, so I would have a friend ask me to go on a walk, and in the past, she had brought up some things that felt were in a sensitive topic for me. And so we'd go on these walks. She'd ask me about a topic that was just hard for me to talk about with somebody I didn't know very well. And so what I would find myself doing in the past is usually either oversharing to get her to like me. And then I would feel upset with myself afterward because I had overshared. And so that felt kind of like I sold myself out and I abandoned myself in order to get someone's approval that I didn't really ultimately care about. Or I would get defensive on the walk and I would say something that hurt her feelings. And there wasn't really an in between. And so I identified that as a skill set I wanted to work on. And I remember one time she asked me to go on a walk, and I told her, I'd love to. If you want to bring up this topic, please let's set aside a time dedicated to talk about that. On this walk, I'd really just love to connect as friends. And that was the first time I enjoyed a walk with a friend. I didn't sell myself out, I had clear boundaries, and I honored them. And it was then that I recognized, okay, the next step for me is to really learn and work on boundaries. And so I began learning about those and what I thought boundaries were. I feel like, Olga, you probably see this often, but what I thought boundaries were and what they actually were so vastly different. I thought boundaries were me being mean. And I thought boundaries were something that I like sanctions I imposed on other people's behavior. And what I've recognized is boundaries are my edges. And when I know what I want, first of all, boundaries are based on what I want. And when I recognize that somebody I'm with is crossing or violating a boundary that I have in my mind, I have an opportunity to communicate it. That's it. It's not that I'm reprimanding anyone else. I can set an expectation at any point in time that of how I would like to engage in the relationship or be treated in a relationship. And then I have to decide what I am going to do if that boundary gets crossed again. I have to hold myself accountable.
I love that. And I love that boundaries came after responsibility. You didn't really know the sequence you were following, but it makes perfect sense. First, you recognize that the not speaking up was your responsibility. And then you realize that you could, and that boundaries were part of that. You are absolutely right. Every single human I meet who's got boundary issues, and they would say that because they know it. Everybody who has boundary issues are like, The first one to self-disclose, oh yeah, I don't even know what boundaries are. I don't have boundaries. I have boundaries. I don't have boundaries. I have boundary issues. The reason that we have a boundary issues because we misunderstand them. We don't know their importance and we are not taking responsibility of them, of ourselves, really, because boundaries are there as an act of love. For me, that was a
Yes.
mindset shift. Boundaries are an act of love. So when I come to you, Steph, and I tell you, listen, I am your friend, but I've got some conditions. I come with conditions. We all want to love unconditionally. The reality is the only human I truly love unconditionally, and I have no shame in saying this, is my son.
Yes.
It's the
Same here.
only unconditional love I know, if I'm being completely honest. Because if my husband does something that I don't think is forgivable, my love, I might still love him, but I'm going to have a very conditional response to my relationship with him. Whereas my son can do the unthinkable and he will still have my love. I might be disappointed. I'm still going to be right next to him all the way through. So I think that sometimes we think we are supposed to be liked by everybody unconditionally, everybody and anyone, like you said, the waiter that you might never see again, or the person you see often, and that just creating those boundaries is such an important part of speaking up, of communicating, of using our voice. It is probably the most powerful way of using your voice is by setting up your boundaries, which are not crazy.
Yeah.
You telling a friend, sure, I'd like to meet with you, but this is how it will be convenient to me. This is what I will need in order to meet with you. It will have to be halfway through. Like if your friend lives, I have a friend who lives across town, and it was always one way because I would never say, hey, that's too far for me to drive. But she had no issue saying, I can't come to your house. It's too far for me to drive. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'll come over. Like, even though I had the same thought. Finally, I'm like, you know what? I feel the same way. So why don't we just meet halfway? It wasn't complicated. It made sense for her because we both felt the same way. The difference was one of us was willing to say it. The other one was like, I'll just please you at all cost.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think too, what I found was that the core issue for me, which actually came after starting to practice boundaries setting, was I had to care and stand up for myself. And that was uncomfortable because I didn't like who I was. And I didn't think it was safe to like who I was. And that's a part of my backstory. But once you set boundaries, the whole point is that you exist. So I had to recognize that I matter, I exist. And as a human, that means I come with preferences and desires and needs. And the way that I get those is by speaking up. And so I went about this part in a way that feels almost reversed, but it was like the perfect way for me to start seeing I can't handle being me. I can't handle being alone with myself. I can't handle all these things. So then I went back to skills I had already developed of learning to be at cause for that. And so learning to be at cause for something that's really painful isn't well, you did this to yourself. It's not being harsh with myself. It's understanding that I did the best I could with the resources I had. And now that I have awareness, I get to choose something different. So, what do I want to choose? So, that's when I began getting some specific support for myself, therapy, for instance. And I started recognizing that as much as I want to have loving, communicative relationships, and as much as I wanted to speak up for myself, I had to acknowledge the real issue, which was I would prefer to not acknowledge that I exist.
Mhm.
I would prefer to be invisible. Me speaking up for myself, me having preferences, which is a foundational human component of our existence, that was just too painful for me. And as soon as I started getting support with that, things began unfolding faster. I feel like the first two skills that I developed are what helped me destigmatize getting the support I needed in order to create the change I wanted and needed. And so I think that for anyone listening, the very cool thing for you is learning to be at cause and learning to set boundaries are free. You can learn to do that on your own. You can learn to do that right now. Everything that you need, there are ways that you could start it now on your own for free. So if there's anything holding you back from creating the change that you desire in your life, use any of the tools that we've been talking about and see how it feels to just test them out. And ultimately, know that you are worth getting the support that you need. You are worth it. It is okay for that to be high priority in your life, in your finances, in your relationships, for you to get the support that you do need. That's really important.
I second that. It's incredible. The shift is amazing to see. And I do think that all of us have something that 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 we believe. And in my experience as a former therapist, and even now as I'm coaching, it always brings us back to childhood or to something of our past where we misunderstood speaking up, like, so I could, when I said I had an idea as to where I would have learned to not speak up, I clearly remember being in primary school and my school teacher pulling me aside and telling me, when you don't think about your words, you hurt people. Do you think I wanted to hurt people? No, that would have been the last thing. So she was like, you really need to think through before you say things, because I would be like a child, right? Like I would just say exactly what was in my mind. Like I was very transparent. My mom would say that I would come home and be like, Mom, we bought your Mother's Day gift. It's a, whatever.
Yes.
So nobody could be around me because I would just be saying exactly what I saw, how I saw it, how I interpret the world. And being in school is the first time I learned that my words, somebody made me understand that my words hurt people. And so I learned as a child, I interpret that as don't speak. If you're going to hurt people, your words don't talk. My intention was never to hurt, but this teacher made it seem like if I didn't think about my words, I would hurt people. And I understand where she was coming from. Now, as a child, I misunderstood that. Like you probably did. I'm like, oh, I can't talk. Just don't talk. By no means was I ever a quiet human. I still talked a lot. But I just felt like my words, my opinion took a second or a third step of existence, and that I would ignore this over time because my main goal in life is helping people. And it's been since I was a tiny little kid. I wanted to help people. And that only got stronger throughout the years. I just want to help people. That's my biggest, that's why I'm here. And I've known this since I was little. So of course, somebody saying my words hurt people turned me away from wanting to talk my truth. And I remember telling my teacher, but it's the truth. But I spoke the truth. And she says, yes, but the truth can hurt people. So you don't have to say it because it's the truth. And I get it. You don't have to say everything you think about, which I would have. So as an adult, I had to reorganize the thoughts and say, it's true. I don't have to say everything I think about. I don't have to tell anybody, hey, you've gained weight. I've noticed, just because I've noticed that, I don't have to say those things. But also I have to honor my inner self. When something is not in agreement with me, when my opinion, like I had to give value back to my opinion and understand that my opinion, like you said, was worthy and mattered. And that my inner voice that only I could hear, I needed to actually hear it and say, hey, Olga, I heard you. And I am going to advocate on your behalf. And that felt life-giving. Like finally somebody cared about me. And I would say that my adult life, I always wanted people to care about me because the child felt like she didn't have that. And so taking that responsibility, and I do love one thing you said that I wouldn't have worded that way. Be the results yourself first. How many of us who are not using our words or our voice on a regular basis because we don't have the confidence? Because I have so many coaching clients who tell me, I don't even know what I want. No, you do. You just don't give any power to that voice. You've heard it. You want to have children, or you don't want to have children, or but you're not giving any power because you think it might create disapproval from others. And so you're giving that, but I love that being the results first, because what does that do is giving us full responsibility to be that. So when your feeling is to be liked by others, when your feeling is to be approved by others, when your feeling is that you want to not be invisible, that you want to be seen, that you want to be heard and understood, ask yourself, am I bringing those results myself? Am I listening to myself? Am I liking myself? And listen, if you don't like yourself, you just know where to put the work. How do I begin to like myself? What do I need to let go of that stops me from liking me? And most times that's mental drama. It's garbage in your brain that you can easily choose. Okay, maybe not so easily, but that you can choose to begin to let go, because it leads to you not liking you. So when we have this crazy, not even human expectations on ourselves, and that makes us not like ourselves. Like I have a client who is allergic to making mistakes. Like honestly, she's allergic. She like goes into full shock whenever she makes a mistake. How unhuman is that? Like as a human, you will be making mistakes. The rest of and eating health could be done the wrong way. Like you can swallow your own saliva and choke on your own saliva. Like it's so easy to just make any mistake. So what our responsibilities? Am I leading example of somebody who's okay liking me, imperfect and all? And if not, that's where the work begins. And like Steph was saying, do what you can on your own, and the rest, let the experts help you. Whether that's therapy for you, might not be therapy for you. You might not have any abuse. Like I would feel in many ways similar to what Steph was describing, and I don't have a history of abuse. I just believe very strongly what I believed on, like speaking will hurt others. So it brings you back to being quiet. You might have your own mental drama to uncover. Do that. Do it on your own, and then ask for help should you need it. And I love that, Steph, you overcame the barriers that stop you from therapy, because I know therapy is a big one, for people to think that I must be crazy. This is for the crazy ones. When I said that I started this journey and I decided to get out of that burnout, I had all the help I could. I had a weekly therapist. I had somebody who did energy work. I had like all the team. Everybody helped me. So I knew, and that was actually something that my ego needed to get over, that the helper needed help, right? As coaches, as nurses, doctors, we all have to be like, oh God, I get sick too. I have mental trauma as well. And so without shame, we'll say I did years of therapy. Most of my 20s, I did therapy. And in my 30s, I went back because infertility was heavy. And I went back to doing some OCD therapy. I am borderline OCD. And so therapy is very important for my personality. And it probably will be in an ongoing basis. My marriage did therapy. We went to couples therapy, and we both have nothing but amazing things to say. It's like going to the doctors. My husband and I think that every couple should be visiting a therapist a couple of times a year. You just, you hear yourself differently. You're like, oh yeah, this is true. And you come out so much stronger. Most of us wait until we're like, cannot function. That's when I went to see a therapist for the first time. I cannot function. I cannot sleep. I cannot be with myself. I am in complete distress. My advice, go sooner. Go sooner, because the work, it's going to be less intensive. You're going to see results faster, and you're going to feel so much better to get over any mental blocks you have right now at investing in yourself, whether that's through therapy or coaching or medication or naturopathic medicine. Be unapologetic about giving yourself the importance to be your priority, mentally, physically, spiritually, even.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I really appreciate it. One of the things I loved is that we were saying like words matter. So I'm not saying talk all the time. Don't even be intentional about your words. Be intentional. Know what you're saying. Does this matter? Me saying this, is it important? Do they need to hear it? Do I need to say it? Would it make an impact if I say it? Be intentional about your words. And this is the perfect example. Me telling Steph something that was sincere to me, like I have a voice and I love it. And that's still my truth. Hence, I have a podcast. Like somebody else needs to hear my voice. No, I'm joking, but it is my truth still that I feel that I can honor that voice, inspire somebody to do their own journey of listening to the voice, guys. When we don't speak up, that shit never happens. Nobody's gonna get inspired by you because you just didn't say anything. So, being intentional, using your words is not only powerful, how we use them is powerful, but in turn will give power to others to use their voice. Have you ever been at a meeting where nobody's talking and then the first person talks and everybody has permission and then everybody talks and you're like, oh my God, it took one person to be courageous, to speak so that everybody else had the same courage. Be that leader. That's my best wish for you guys, that you become that leader, even if it seems incredibly difficult to start the easy way, like Steph and I did. Steph was telling friends, I was telling strangers what I thought, like the waiter. Yeah, no, that wasn't so great. And now, you know what? Like it's been, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 10 years since I started that, probably longer, intentional use of my voice. One of the benefits, I became an executive. I worked in the executive office of my job when I was employed because I used my voice. It gave me leadership skills. I became a trainer provincially for social workers in the child welfare area because I used my voice. I learned that public speaking wasn't terrifying. In fact, I liked it. So I think when we look at what is there to gain, it becomes a bit easier to just say, hey, yeah, maybe I'm going to use my voice.
I also felt very much like my desires were selfish. And so me speaking up for myself meant that I did not have, that I was being selfish, that I was speaking up for what I wanted. If you take a second and look at your desires, I think you're going to find that they're incredibly beautiful. The more deeply I looked at my desires without judgment, the more I saw my desire is that I have a healthy relationship with these people that I genuinely care about. And I believe that the way that we have had a relationship with each other has been really unhealthy. And so I'm holding hope for something better. And then I thought, wow, that's a really beautiful desire. And I looked at all of my desires that I just categorically judged as selfish because I desired them, because I had wants that were mine. And I recognized my desires are so beautiful. I desire things for myself and for others that better the world. And not every single desire is for the world. But I've learned that through recognizing those initial desires of, I want something better for this relationship and I believe it's possible. Then I was able to reframe everything from that to I want a Chanel handbag. Then it didn't start as I want a Chanel handbag, so therefore I'm materialistic. And so because I'm materialistic, I'm self-centered and controlling in relationships. It actually reframed all of it.
I love it.
Of course.
And I love it because this is the truth. We would believe that it's so selfish, then we just stop ourselves from success, from greatness. How many of us say, I want a great marriage and I also want to be a millionaire. Okay, I know I can have it all, so I'm just gonna settle for a great marriage. And I'm gonna be broke because that's the law. Like if I have a great marriage, I'm gonna be. Or I love this, and I want to challenge everybody for those beliefs. Like, have the Chanel bag, have the trips, have the happy marriage, have it all because you are worthy. And it's so funny because it could begin with something that you think is not important, like using your voice, then stepping into your greatness and into your success, and then undoing things from your past that need to be undone, reorganize them, which is far less terrifying than what it sounds like. I promise you that.
It really is. Yeah. And it's really just a matter of what you choose gets to say who you are. Are you going to let your circumstances tell you who you are? Or are you going to say, I choose who I am, and the circumstances will adjust as I lead myself.
Oh, I'm gonna write that down. This is who I am, and then what the circumstances.
Adjust. Self leadership is what started changing everything for me. And it started with being at cause and then learning to set boundaries and then owning who I was and getting support for the parts of me that felt really broken and damaged and creating my own healing journey. If I had let my circumstances tell me who I was, I would never have done that. I chose first, before learning to be at cause, I chose first that I was going to lead myself no matter what the circumstances said. And I knew that might bring up some really difficult things. But I also knew that if I could lead myself through difficult things, I could lead myself through the most intense joy and happiness. And I didn't want to numb myself out of it. So I went for it. And if you can learn to lead yourself and not let your circumstances tell you who you are, you start regaining the power that you gave away.
I love it. Mic drop. So, ladies listening up to this episode, you're lucky that you got to hear it from Steph herself. She's speaking from a place of transformation. She's speaking genuinely. She's done the work. She's not telling us it's easy. She's telling us we can choose to do it and we can do it responsibly while being supported, which I think is what I want you to take home is you choose. You choose who you are and the circumstances will adjust. I love it. Let that be the thing that you've remembered. That one, and I have a voice and I love it. And take space. Be unapologetic about taking that space. Steph, thank you so much for coming back to the podcast and sharing with us your transformation. This is like volume 2 from breakdown to breakthrough. Keep evolving this. This is awesome. Anybody who's listening who might be an entrepreneur, where can they find you?
Come hang out with me on Instagram. My handle is at the Stephanie Booth, and I would love to connect with you. You can always send me a DM. I am always in my private messages. And you can just tell me where you're coming from, and I'd love to connect with you.
Yep. Let us know what you thought of this episode, guys. Give us a like and a subscribe if you want to hear more from this type of episodes. And also, do something nice for yourself today. Don't just listen to this podcast and say like, wow, that was inspiring, and then move on with your day. Just take a moment right as this is coming to an end and think to yourself, how could I give myself how can I make myself feel worthy today? Probably one thing I can do or even think or even say that makes me feel appreciated from me to me. That's your homework. I'll see you guys next Monday for another episode. Steph, thank you so much. Love having you here. Love being your friend. And I have loved seeing this transformation and being a far witness. Oh yeah, tell them about your move. You're moving where? Her house is fully boxed.
Yeah, we are moving from the Midwest to California. We bought a home sight unseen, and we're moving across the country. So we're about a week out from our move, and I'm so excited. I cannot wait.
And so that made me even more thankful that you took time out of a really busy season of life to come talk to my audience. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I wish you smooth sailing to California. Expect me. I do love wine, and I've never been to California. So I am expecting whenever we can travel. I think we can travel now. I don't follow the news. But I believe I can now go to cross the border and go visit friends. So
you have a guest room with your name on it.
I love it. I might have to leave Mateo at home. I don't know. It's gonna be one of those trips. Okay, love you tons. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening, and I will catch you soon.